Racist police officer arrests black pregnant woman for overspeeding. Unaware she is a police captain in labor. Have you ever wondered how far someone in power could go, all because of a snap judgment based on someone's race? What would you do if you saw this happen right in front of your eyes? It was a bright afternoon. The sun was shining down, and the roads were surprisingly clear. Cassandra, a highly respected police captain, was driving home. She was 7 months pregnant, feeling a little discomfort, so she wanted to get home as quickly as possible. But little did she know, this peaceful ride was about to turn into a nightmare. Suddenly, the sound of sirens filled the air. A police cruiser sped up behind her, its lights flashing. Cassandra glanced at her speedometer. She was just a bit over the speed limit. She slowed down, pulled over to the side of the road, and waited. Her heart pounded, not because of the speed, but because, as a black woman, she had heard too many stories of traffic stops going wrong. Could this be the day she becomes another statistic? As she rolled down her window, the officer approached. His face was cold, stern. He didn't ask any routine questions, but immediately launched into accusations. "License and registration. You were speeding, ma'am," he snapped, his tone sharp and condescending. Cassandra handed him her documents and tried to explain. "Officer, I'm pregnant, and I just wanted to get home quickly. I know I was a little over the limit, but..." "Pregnant or not, you broke the law," the officer cut her off. His gaze lingered on her for a moment, sizing her up, but it was clear his assumptions about her had already formed. What did he see first? A speeding driver or a black woman? Have you ever felt like someone judged you before you even had a chance to speak? The officer's posture stiffened as he glanced at her identification, but he didn't seem to recognize her rank. Instead of asking for clarification, he doubled down. "Step out of the vehicle," he demanded. Cassandra was shocked. "Is this really necessary? I told you, I'm a police captain and I'm pregnant." But the officer's eyes darkened. His racism was showing through, even if he didn't say the words directly. "I don't care who you are. Get out of the car now, or I'll make you." His hand hovered threateningly near his holster. What would you do in this situation? Would you comply, knowing the danger, or stand your ground? Cassandra felt her stomach churn, not just from the baby, but from the sheer humiliation. She had spent years building her career, fighting for justice, and here she was, reduced to nothing more than another black woman in the eyes of this officer. She didn't want to escalate things, but she knew she couldn't let this slide either. What if this had been someone else, someone without her experience and knowledge of the law? Slowly, she got out of the car. The officer immediately grabbed her by the arm, his grip too tight for someone in her condition. "I said move," he barked, pulling her roughly toward his squad car. Can you imagine the pain of being treated like a criminal when you've done nothing wrong? Cassandra winced, but tried to stay calm. Her mind raced, thinking of all the training she had received over the years. She knew her rights, but here she was, vulnerable and pregnant, with an officer who clearly didn't care about her well-being. By now, a small crowd had gathered. Some pulled out their phones to record the incident, while others looked on in shock. How far would this officer go in his blatant display of power and prejudice? Without warning, the officer shoved Cassandra against his cruiser. "You're under arrest for resisting," he said, slapping handcuffs onto her wrists. Her swollen belly pressed against the cold metal, and she winced in pain. Would you stay silent if you witnessed this? How far does one have to go before someone steps in to help? As Cassandra tried to explain that she wasn't resisting, her voice fell on deaf ears. The officer seemed to enjoy the control he had over her, his racism now on full display. "People like you always think you can get away with anything," he muttered under his breath. That was the breaking point for Cassandra. "People like me? You mean black people?" She shot back, her voice filled with frustration and disbelief. "Do you even know who I am?" The officer sneered. "I don't care who you are. You're under arrest." He yanked her toward the back seat of the squad car, ignoring her discomfort and the growing crowd's murmurs of disapproval. What would happen if someone intervened? Would it change the course of this nightmare? Just as things seemed like they couldn't get worse, another police car pulled up. A higher-ranking officer stepped out, his eyes widening in shock as he saw the scene unfolding. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice firm but calm. Cassandra, still handcuffed and visibly shaken, looked up. "I'm Captain Cassandra Lewis, and this officer arrested me for overspeeding, completely ignoring the fact that I'm a pregnant police officer." The supervising officer's eyes darted to the arresting cop, who suddenly looked pale, realizing the gravity of his mistake. He stammered. I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't care to listen," Cassandra said, her voice steady now, despite everything. "You saw my skin color, and you made assumptions." How do you think this officer felt now, knowing that he had arrested someone far outranking him and for no valid reason? The crowd murmured as the supervising officer unlocked the handcuffs and helped Cassandra stand. "Captain Lewis, I apologize for this disgraceful treatment. I will handle this personally." The officer who had arrested her stood frozen, his face a mask of panic. He could lose his job, face legal action, or worse. "I didn't mean any harm. I was just following procedure," he stammered weakly. "Procedure?" Cassandra's eyes flashed. "Procedure would have been a respectful conversation. You didn't follow procedure. You followed your bias. What consequences should someone face for such an abuse of power?" The supervisor pulled the offending officer aside, his voice low but firm. "This is going on your record. Prepare for a suspension, and possibly worse. You've crossed a line today." The officer's face fell as he realized the severity of his actions. He had not only humiliated an innocent black woman, but a highly respected police captain, someone who could have been his ally if he'd only treated her with respect. Cassandra stood tall despite her ordeal, knowing that she had to keep fighting, not just for herself, but for every black woman, every pregnant woman, every person who had ever been unfairly targeted by those in power. So, what would you do if you were in Cassandra's shoes? Would you let this slide, or would you stand up for justice? In the end, this officer's actions would serve as a harsh reminder that racism, bias, and prejudice still run deep, even among those sworn to protect and serve. But Cassandra knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let this end here. She would press charges, speak out, and make sure this officer never forgot the day he tried to arrest a black pregnant woman, unaware she was a police captain. The air was thick with tension as the officer who had wrongfully arrested Cassandra stood there, his face pale with shock. The crowd, still recording, watched closely. Some whispered among themselves, clearly appalled by what they had just witnessed. Cassandra looked directly at him, her eyes filled with both anger and a sense of calm authority. "You thought you could get away with this because I'm black," she said, her voice steady. "You didn't expect me to fight back, let alone be a police captain. How many others have you done this to? How many times have you let your bias cloud your judgment? If this happened to someone in authority, can you imagine how often it happens to those without power or status?" The officer fumbled, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was a mistake. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't mean to." "You didn't know because you didn't care," Cassandra interrupted. "You saw a black woman, and in your eyes, that was enough to make me guilty. Pregnant or not, you didn't care about my safety, my rights, or my life."
If you've watched this far, leave a 100 in the comment section, because you are type of person that likes to finish what they started. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to get notified whenever we drop new videos. Now back to the story.
The supervisor stepped forward, addressing Cassandra directly. "Captain Lewis, I deeply regret what has happened. Rest assured, this matter will not be taken lightly. This officer will face disciplinary action, and we will conduct a thorough investigation." But Cassandra wasn't satisfied with just promises. She knew how the system worked. "I want this on record," she said, her voice firm. "I want his suspension to be public, and I will be pressing charges for harassment and unlawful arrest." What would you do if you were in Cassandra's position? Would you press charges, or would you let it go? The officer's face turned pale, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He took a step toward Cassandra, hands trembling. "Please, I didn't mean to. It wasn't personal. It wasn't personal?" Cassandra raised an eyebrow. How is treating someone like a criminal based on their skin color not personal? Would you trust the system to change? Or would you take matters into your own hands if you were Cassandra? What would you do in Cassandra's shoes? Would you stand up against injustice, no matter the cost? Or would you let it slide, knowing it could happen again? Click on the link below or visit my channel to watch full video.